Hi, welcome back. We're going to do 5. So it says this expression, 2z3 minus kx minus a whole bunch of stuff. This polynomial, and k is a constant, meaning it's just the same old number, if z minus 1 is a factor. Okay, so that's what we said a minute ago. Z minus 1, if z minus 1 is a factor, then that means that when z is 1, when z is 1, the polynomial is 0. Okay, so we can plug in 1 for z, and we know this would have to equal 0. So let's do that. So 2, plug in a 1 for z, plug in a 1, plug in a 1, plug, oh, that's an x, so not a z, be careful there. And we know all that would be equal to 0 if z minus 1 was a factor. Okay, so that, clean this up a little bit. All right, so 2 minus 2 is 0, 5x and 2x. Okay, so let's add kx to both sides. We get kx is equal to 7x. Divide both sides by x, and we get k is 7. So that's what they were looking for. What would k have to be so that when z is 1, this thing is equal to 0? So we write 7. Okay, let's try number 6. So it says when the expression 3x squared minus 8x minus 4 is divided by 3x minus 2. So let's do that. We get oh, I already have a 3, so I just need one more x. All right, so that would be a 3x squared minus 2x. Now let's distribute a negative. We get a negative 6x, and the negative 4 drops down. So I need to multiply by a negative 2 so that I get negative 6x plus 4. Okay, so as we cancel vertically, we distribute a negative through here, so that turns into a negative. This goes away, and I get a negative 8. So I get x minus 2 and negative 8 over 3x minus 2. Now they're asking, what is a? So I end up seeing what they're asking me for is what is this part here? And that's why I've picked B as my answer. Cool. Let's look at 7. They state the expression 2x squared minus 4x minus 3 can be written like that. So what they're saying is what ends up happening when you divide by x plus 1. So let's do that. I get another 2 and an x plus 2x, okay? Distribute our negative. And 2x times 1x, isn't it? Okay, so that's still good. Vertically, I get negative 6x, and that drops down. I'm going to multiply by a negative 6. And don't forget to distribute a negative. So I get 3. Okay, so I get 2x. So this part would be my a. A times x plus 1 plus b. The a part is this 2x minus 6. That's the x plus 1 part. And b is my remainder, the number 3. It says, what is a in terms of x? A would be this 2x minus 6. All right, we're plugging along. What about the next one? It says, what expression could be written in this way? So we rewrite our problem, dividing it by the x minus 2, distribute our negative, let that drop down. So 6 times x is 6x. It's a negative 12, okay. Distribute the negative 3. So this could be rewritten x plus 6 times x minus 2 with the remainder 3. And that's the same as what we started with. So they're asking what's A, what's B, and what's C added together. Okay. Well, A would be the number in front of x, B is this number 6, and C is the remainder. Well, there isn't a number in front of the x, but you should be thinking, yep, that's the number 1. So 1 plus 6 plus 3 would add up to 10, and yes, that's what they're looking for in this question. Ooh, let's keep going. For a polynomial, if p of x, if given that when x is 2, it's 0, what that's telling you is that x minus 2 equals 0. This must be a factor, because just like we've been doing a minute ago, if you add 2 to both sides, you get x is equal to 2. So what do we know? If this is a true statement, we know that x minus 2 had to have been a factor. So what have they written here for me? Oh, there it is. X minus 2 must be a factor. Awesome. All right, 10 says, if p of x is these 4 terms, and it's divisible, that means it's a factor of the following, what does that mean? Okay, well, if this were true, let's assume it was, then that means that if we plugged in 2 for the x, this polynomial would have to equal 0, right? So let's go ahead and plug in 2 here. So we get 2 to the third, 2 squared minus 5 times 2 plus 3. And if it is a factor, then I'm going to get 0. Okay, so that'd be 8, 4, 10, 3. Oops, that's 5, and that is not, 5 is not equal to 0. So this one's out. Okay, let's try another one. If x minus 2 is a factor, that means if we plugged in 1, we should get 0. So 1 cubed plus 1 squared minus 5 times 1 plus 3. 1 plus 1 minus 5 plus 3 would be 5 minus 5, which is 0. So this would be a yes. Yes, that is a factor. All right, let's try this one. If x minus 3 is divisible or is a factor, that means if I plug in negative 3. So plugging in negative 3, okay, that'd be negative 27, positive 9, positive 15, positive 3, 15. This is not on the calculator portion, so you got to do the work yourself. And I get 0. Okay, so that's a big yes. So my answer would be only 2 and 3. Only 2 and 3. Okay. Cool. Let's do another. 11 says, if the polynomial is divisible by that, what does that mean? Well, that means if I plug in 2, I will get 0, right? If I plug in 2, I will get 0. So let's plug in 2. So negative 4 plus 10 plus 14. I don't get 0. So that one's out. Plug in 2, I get 4. Minus 12 minus 2, I don't get 0. Let's plug in 2. I get 8 plus 2 minus 8. I don't get 0. Let's plug in 2. 12 minus 4 minus 8. I get 0. Finally. They were so mean. 12. if x minus 1 and x plus 1 are both factors, then that means if I have a function and I plug in -1, I get 0. And if I have a function and I plug in +1, I get 0. And last time I checked, 0 is equal to 0. So that also means I could set these equal to each other, which would be really sweet. So let's do that. It says, what's the value of a? So we just said they're factors. So let's plug in -1 here. So I have a, -1 to the power of 4, b, -1 cubed, -1 squared, -1. And we know it has to be equal to 0. We also know it has to equal the same thing as if we plugged in 1. So a 1 to the 4th plus b 1 to the 3rd minus 3 1 squared plus 5 times 1, which is just 5. So we get a plus b minus 3 plus 5. And on this side, we get a minus b minus 3 minus 5. So let's clean this up a little bit. The a's would cancel on both sides. So I got 2b here. So b is -5. Okay. So if we got b is -5, but they want to know what a is. Okay, so we also know that a plus b minus 3 plus 5 has to equal 0. And we said b is -5. So we have a minus 5 minus 3 plus 5 has to equal 0. So a minus 3 is equal to 0. So a is 3. Whew. So a is 3. All right, last one. For a polynomial, now they're telling us p of 1/3 is equal to 0. So that means if I plug in 1/3 or I do x minus 1/3, that will equal 0. So that's not any of my answers. So let's get rid of the fraction. We can multiply each term by 3, right? So we get 3 times x minus 1 is equal to 3 times 0, which is still 0. And what do you know? We get 3x minus 1 is our answer. Let me just double check that all that looks good. It does. Thanks for joining us.